Yo, what's good, YouTube? Welcome back to another Marvel Snap Chill video. Today we're going to be discussing the new Series 5 card, the new big bad, Kang the Conqueror. There's lots of confusion surrounding this card, and I wanted to make a video to clarify some points that the community has been discussing about that are a bit confusing. So let's go ahead and read Kang together, and then we can discuss what this means for the game. So Kang is a 5-cost, 0 power. On reveal, look at what your opponent did, then restart the turn without Kang. So kind of picture this thematically. Kang gets played, you look at what your opponent did, and then you restart the turn as though it never occurred, right? As though nothing ever changed. So all the cards played will rewind back into your hand. The card you drew for your turn, if you're the opponent, goes back to the top of the deck and you redraw it. Okay, you following me there? So all the cards rewind, they go back to your hand, or if it was a drawn card, back to the top of your deck. Okay, and then so therefore, and then everything that you did that turn, literally everything you did that turn, whether it was snapped, the cards you played, if you moved cards, anything you did gets completely rewound as though it never happened, and then you replay the turn again. Now, I don't know if you're on a time limit, so let's say you play Kang, and the opponent ends their action, and then you look at what your opponent did. I don't know if you like press a button and then Kang does his thing and it restarts the turn, or if you have to bring Kang back to your hand to indicate you're done, or if it's just you hit end turn. And I'm not sure how that works, right? Because if you hit Kang and end turn, then you might have to hit end turn again. I'm not sure how that works. Probably it's going to be like an end turn thing. But the ramifications of this are huge. Primarily the snap mechanic. You can just snap for free. And Kang is kind of like a 0 mana, 0 power, really, because you get all your mana back. So when you played him for 5 mana or 5 energy, and the turn resets, you get all your 5 energy back, right? So he's essentially a 0 mana 5. The only reason the 5 matters is because you can't play him until turn 5 or turn 6. But the cost of him when you play him is going to be essentially 0 mana. And even if he was a 0 mana, 0 power, I don't see why you wouldn't want to play him on turn 5 or 6 anyways. Primarily turn 6, to be honest. But turn 5 is fine too. So you really don't want to play him to the end of the game anyways, so him being 5 power is almost irrelevant. So he's almost essentially a 0/0, right? Because that 5 power, you're not spending that cost. He goes away and you get that energy back, right? And so a couple other things here. When you play him, the turn you draw him, then when all the cards rewind and go back to your hand and back to the top of the deck, it says without Kang. So Kang is gone, right? So the card that you drew that turn, if it was Kang, ends up being the next card on top of your deck, right? So if you draw him, if you play him on the turn that you draw him, he essentially thins your deck 1 card, right? He does not draw you a card if it's not the turn that you drew him. Remember that. So he's not really making your deck effectively 10 cards with America Chavez, right? I think there are a lot of people saying that combined with America Chavez, he makes your deck essentially 10 cards. That's not really true because he's not drawing a new card unless you played him on the turn you drew him. So whenever you draw him on turn 5 or turn 6, he will be effectively making your deck 10 card deck with America Chavez, but you're not going to be drawing him on turn 6 because you have America Chavez in your deck, right? So it's really only that window of turn 5. If you draw him on that window of turn 5, he's essentially making your deck a 10 card deck, right? And so otherwise, if you drew him on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, if the other card that you drew that turn is what you'll draw instead, not Kang, right? So Kang is not going to be making your deck essentially 10 cards every game. So That's good news. But the real problem with Kang is the snap equity that he's going to be gaining you. He is going to, by all intent and purposes, win you games that you have no business winning, right? And so that really throws your cube equity like through the roof in a sense, because if it's a game that you're going to win or you're doing well on, then you're going to keep playing and you're going to snap for real, right? But if you play Kang and you weren't going to win and you snap and then your opponent's like, oh crap, they snapped, then they're going to leave and you're going to win a game you had no business winning, right? Because you get to reverse that, see what they did, and then you can retreat or keep playing to see if you can beat it, right? So, or they're going to retreat just because you snapped, right? So, I mean, like, that's a major, major problem. The snap equity, I think, is what really makes this card great. And then, of course, the Daredevil aspect. It will let you be able to see what your opponent did to counter it and play it, which is also very strong, right? So Kang's really incredible. I think he is really bad for the snap equity aspect. And he's going to be strongest on his own, even without the snap equity, because Daredevil's strong, and Kang's going to be really strong in that regard. So remember that when you play him, all the cards go basically back that you played back to your hand. The card you drew goes back to the top of your deck, and then the whole turn restarts again. Okay. So those are the facts around Kang. I think he's going to be a really good card. Do I think you should spend tokens on him? I don't think you should. I think you're better off buying something like Thanos or Galactus, because Kang is not really like an archetype card, right? Like, you can't really build a deck around him as well as you can of like Thanos or Galactus. There's not going to really be like a Kang deck. You might have some of that aspect with Daredevil, but it's not as like archetype. It's like not as game defining as like Thanos or Galactus. Like Thanos and Galactus kind of like, they do so much just on their own to your deck, like to what your deck does, right? Like Thanos, the moment you put him in your deck, he's adding 6 cards to your deck, like whether you draw him or not, right? Kang has to be used when you draw him. Galactus is similar, but Galactus is doing something no other card does as well, and that's destroy locations, right? So that's incredible, right? No matter if there's an armor there or anything, like, he's totally breaking the laws of the game. And Kang is kind of doing that, but I think it's to a little bit of a lesser degree. But he's still super, super strong. Like, definitely in the category of Thanos and Galactus as well. But I think he's like the 3rd level there, but like above everything else. So you have like everything below them, and then you have like Kang at the bottom of that tier with those 3 guys. But I think I would prioritize those 2 guys first and then Kang, right? But Kang is really cool if you have an excess of tokens. You already got Thanos, or you already got Galactus, or you don't really like Galactus, then grab Kang. Kang can go in almost every deck. And I'm going to show you a couple decks that I think Kang can go into. Kang is going to go really well with MODOK, funny enough. If you watch the new Ant-Man movie, MODOK and Kang are like, you know, allies. And MODOK is like a creation of Kang in that game, in that movie. So funny enough, MODOK will go really well on something like, Kang will go really well on something like a MODOK deck. I think like you can cut like this Enchantress here, right? Or Swordmaster, and you're just automatically going to increase your win percentage with adding Kang to your deck, because you're going to, without a doubt, have more games where your opponent retreats because you snapped with Kang for in a situation in which you normally wouldn't snap. So just simply adding him to this deck is going to increase your cube equity and probably your win percentage, and also slightly increase your chance of drawing MODOK on curve, right? Because if you draw Kang on 5, then you can play Kang and you draw 1 more card, which gives you 1 more chance of drawing MODOK. Right, because you're not going to draw America Chavez on 5. So like, it just makes your deck even that much more efficient at drawing MODOK. And MODOK is vital in this deck because you need to activate Morbius with MODOK, Wolverine, Swarm, these 3 cards, and Dracula all become better the moment you play MODOK. MODOK is like vital to this card, and you're going to draw it like getting close to 80% of the time if you have Kang in your deck. So yeah, I really, really highly recommend a deck like this, or even like a Sarah deck, So once again, another 5-cost card, a card you want to draw on turn 5. Kang is going to be really good. So if you have Kang instead of that card, you can play Kang. Kang disappears. Remember, if it's on turn 5, Kang disappears. You draw a new card since Kang is not there to be drawn again. And then Sarah could be that card, right? To give you Sarah on turn 5. So they will improve the consistency of a deck like Sarah. So decks that really want to draw something important by turn 5 are going to really like Kang. And then Kang could just be added to almost anything. You could just add Kang to literally anything. So you can just add Kang to a Death Wave deck. So on Death Wave, you really want to draw a wave on turn 5. So you could play Kang in this deck to increase your consistency to get wave, right? So he'd be really good in here. Maybe you could like cut Iceman. Maybe you cut Iceman and you add in Kang. Really good in Death Wave. In Lockjaw decks, he'd be really good, you know, because you really want to make sure that you're drawing some of these key pieces before turn 5. So, and then you can be pulled out by Lockjaw for free, and then he disappears, so he thins your deck, right? So Lockjaw, you can have Lockjaw, you can play anything. You can play Wasp on the Lockjaw, and then Kang will come out and reset the turn, and then disappear, right? So when you play Wasp again, it'll pull out a different card other than Kang, and your deck will be thinned, right? So effectively, you'll be making your deck, you know, a thinner deck more frequently than other decks because Lockjaw can also pull him. So not only can you draw Kang to play him, but you can also draw him through Lockjaw, right? So really good there. You can really just add this guy to a lot of different decks. You know, you can just cut anything and just add him in and probably see your cube equity and win percentage go up, you know. So yeah, that's kind of like my take on Kang. He's probably not going to be like 100% include because there's going to be some decks where like your deck is really, really tight and you need every card in that deck for it to function correctly. But that's going to be like a really rare occurrence. You know, like you can make adjustments all the time in a lot of these decks. You could probably cut something in here to add Kang to increase consistency. There's lots of things you can do to make your deck more consistent by adding Kang. But there are going to be those rare occasions, like maybe a Surfer deck won't want Kang because you need to draw those 3-cost cards more frequently than Kang. But it's still decent in Surfer because you've got Sarah in there and you really want to draw Sarah on turn 5. So Kang's a pretty awesome card, pretty incredible card. He's going to be annoying when you see him. Good thing is you probably won't see him very often, but I think that's so funny. They just launch a new card and then no one can play it. So like, how silly is that? Which, you know, I can make a video on that another day. But those are my thoughts on Kang. If there's anything I missed or anything you think should be added, go ahead and add it to the comment section below. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.